Flexing its military muscles, China shows off its weapons and troops in a parade marking the end of World War II. But Beijing's growing military power has some regional neighbors and Western leaders worried. Overreaction or justified alarm? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidan. Well, China pulled out all the stops to display its military might during a parade marking the end of the Second World War. President Xi Jinping said the commemoration was about remembering the sacrifices China made during the conflict. He also reaffirmed his country's commitment to peace. Most Western leaders were a no-show, though, with many concerned about what they considered to be the parade's anti-Japan tone. They're also worried about the message Beijing is sending with the show of strength amid regional tensions. We'll be speaking to our guests in just a moment, but first, this report from Sohail Rahman in Beijing.
A nation's pride and military might on display in Tiananmen Square, and a historic opportunity for the Chinese to remember the many millions who died during World War II fighting Japanese aggression. Tiananmen Square hasn't seen this sort of parade since 2009. It's only the fourth since 1960. 12,000 military personnel, past and present, representing all the Chinese armed services, marched to precision timing. More than 80% of the military hardware on show was unveiled for the first time. Tanks, armoured vehicles, drones, artillery and dozens of aircraft entertained large crowds. A huge security operation surrounds the event, happening just a few kilometres down the road, and not everybody wants to watch the parade from home. So many people have come to vantage points like this to see the parade, not necessarily passing them on the road, but up in the sky.
I have watched past several parades on TV. I feel like this is the most spectacular one. It is the biggest in terms of the size. This is a historical moment for China.
Many waited for a much-anticipated speech from Chinese President Xi Jinping, including specially invited heads of state and delegations from more than 100 countries.
People's Liberation Army of China is the People's Army. Its duty is to protect the nation's security and people's well-being and carry out the noble mission of upholding world peace. Here, I announce that China will cut the number of its troops by 300,000.
Despite this significant statement, many leaders from Western nations and the Prime Minister of Japan did not attend. They see China flexing its muscle, sending a message that it can and will defend itself and any disputed territory it aims to claim. China was on the winning side during World War II. Military personnel from 10 nations, including several Central Asian republics, Russia and China's closest South Asian partner Pakistan, joined their wartime ally in the parade. A nationalistic display it might have been, but 70 years on, like many other global nations, China needed to remember its fallen heroes and pay tribute to their sacrifice. But there's also a clear message too of China's new military might, a global superpower that never wants to see another world at war again. Sohail Rahman, Inside Story, Beijing.
Well, for more on this, let's join our guest now from Beijing. We have Xiaoyang Tang, Associate Professor at Tsinghua University. Xiaoyang is also a resident scholar at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. From Tokyo, Yoshiki Mine, Research Director at the Cannon Institute for Global Studies and former Director General at the Japanese Ministry of Defense. And in Washington, D.C., we have Bonnie Glaser, Consultant to the U.S. Government on East Asia and Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies Pacific Forum. Welcome to you all. If I could start with Bonnie. China displayed ballistic missiles, advanced fighter jets, even drones. You don't bring guns that big to a party unless you're trying to send a message to the living as well as just mark an event in the past, do you?
Well, I think that the message was primarily to the Chinese people. The Chinese Communist Party wants to show the people that military modernization has achieved something and that the party is going to defend the interests of the nation. Chinese President Xi Jinping, when he came to power, put forward a goal of achieving the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, which he called the Chinese dream. And this is part of the Chinese dream. It's building a military that will have the capability to defend Chinese interests in the future so that China will never have to experience the century of national humiliation that it experienced in the past.
So, Bonnie, is there no international message
is very
here?
important.
Well, was this only, Bonnie, a domestic consumption message? I mean, they brought the DF-26 ballistic missile, so-called Guam killer ballistic missile, the 21D ballistic missile that's believed to be capable of downing U.S. aircraft carriers. Was there no message to the outside world?
Of course, there was a message for the outside world, although I do think that the domestic audience was primary. But the message for the rest of the world is that China has arrived. This was a coming out party for the PLA. The message is in part one of peace, as Xi Jinping said. The Chinese do not want to fight a war, but they are telling the world that they now have the capabilities as well as the determination to defend Chinese interests going forward if those interests are threatened.
Let's go to Xiaoyang. How do you see things from Beijing? Is China showing that it has the means to defend its interests, to perhaps exact more influence in the region, some would say even domination?
Yes, I think through this parade, actually China has demonstrated clearly its fast development of military power. So 84% of the weapons in the parade are actually quite new. They were demonstrated for the first time. And so this just shows the modernization of the military is picking the pace in China. So this is actually a quite strong signal for the region and also for the world to say that to show the increasing power of the Chinese military.
Yoshiki, in Tokyo, does that worry neighboring countries in the neighborhood like Japan when they see the increasing and growing military might of China?
Well, of course, the growing might of the Chinese power is a serious matter. I think everybody is very concerned with the development and the fact that the Chinese military might is growing very fast and by big steps. But we also have to pay attention to the ideas of Xi Jinping. I think he has a certain ideas to broaden the perspective of commemoration of victory against Japan to a broader theme, that is the struggle and the fight against fascism. What he wanted to achieve was the first indicated in Moscow last May, and this commemoration in Beijing is a part of the pair commemoration of his ideas. I mean the victories. What I want to say is,
let me jump in there, Yoshiki,
in the past,
if you allow me. You said that many countries are watching what's going on in China with alarm. Why? I mean, isn't it understandable that after a history which involves occupation, suppression at the hands of colonial powers, including Japan, wouldn't China want to build up its military defensives?
Yes, I think they are still building their power because they want to demonstrate that they are strong enough to the not only to the people inside China but also to the outside world. And certainly we are watching the signal from which is coming out from the commemoration anniversary activities.
Bonnie, China is cutting its troops by 300,000. This is what, the third cut, I think, since the 1980s, and Xi Jinping, saying Beijing's never going to actually seek hegemony in the region. Has China actually done, is there a pattern of behavior to suggest concern?
Well, there is a pattern of behavior that suggests that the Chinese may not manage their disputes, particularly territorial disputes that they have with their neighbors, peacefully. We can look at the East China Sea, where China has a dispute with Japan, or the South China Sea, where China has a dispute with the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Taiwan and Brunei. And in 2013, we saw that the Chinese unilaterally declared an air defense identification zone. They entered the territorial waters around these disputed islands, which the Japanese call the Senkakus and the Chinese call the Diaoyu, regularly. And in the South China Sea, they have behaved in an intimidating and coercive manner and built up artificial islands, which they are now actually going to enter into the phase of construction and militarization. So, of course, capabilities in themselves are not necessarily a threat. Intentions matter. And China has been somewhat unclear about its intentions, about how it's going to solve these disputes. It insists that it has sovereignty and doesn't allow the other countries to feel secure. And that is really the problem. The United States, of course, has been in the region and its Navy for more than half a century, but there are few countries that feel insecure because of the presence of the presence of U.S. capabilities. And so the onus is really on China as it develops these military capabilities to provide security, to reassure the countries of the region that it will not threaten them.
That's a good point. Let's take that point to Beijing. And Xiaoyang, how would you respond to that, that if you look at the actual actions of the Chinese military, particularly the Chinese Navy and how it's conducted itself vis-a-vis disputes in the South China Sea, unilateral actions over islands, that is a worrying pattern for some countries?
Yes, I think the disputes over islands in South China Sea and in East China Sea have grown for the last years. It's inevitable, actually, as China's economic and political power grows. There must be some change in the geographics in the region and in the world.
When you say change in the geographics, Xiaoyang, when you say change in the geographics, are you really talking about Chinese military domination of the region? Is that China's intention?
No, I don't mean that. I mean the change in geopolitics. So, because the U.S. Navy was the dominating power in this Asia-Pacific region, but China actually has some historical problems. For example, the Taiwan problem, and also the South China Sea, and include from the history. And there was, it's not solved. So therefore, I think China cannot avoid handling and reviewing these problems again. So, and China also in China's growth also will definitely threaten the U.S.'s hegemony in Asia-Pacific. Therefore, then some countries, actually China do not have problems with all of its neighbors. Some neighbors, actually they come to Beijing this time.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just shows China
hold that thought
has a selective method.
All right, hold that thought of you, because you made some good points there about U.S. hegemony in the region, some countries wanting China's intervention too. Many people, though, let's review a little bit of history here, because much of this is to do with the end of World War II, and many people think of the Second World War as beginning in 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. But of course, for China, the conflict began 2 years earlier and carried an enormous human cost. Imperial Japan launched a full-scale and brutal invasion of China in 1937. In the city of Nanking alone, an estimated 300,000 civilians were killed in around 6 weeks. Now, a year later, Japan controlled much of eastern China and looked set to expand. But China's nationalist government refused to surrender. After Japan's bombing of Pearl Harbor, China joined with Western allies in what became a global war. Now, by the time Imperial Japan surrendered in 1945, China had endured 8 years of war and occupation. Around 10 million Chinese civilians were killed, more than any other country in World War II. Bonnie, when you look at sort of the aftermath of this, some would ask the question, there is a lot of unfinished business, there is a lot of unfinished disputes in the region. There is a current order which has been prevailed primarily by Western and US power, but why should Western countries and their allies eternally be the exclusive preeminent powers in Asia?
Well, I think that the United States has said repeatedly that it welcomes China's rise, it welcomes China to contribute to addressing challenges, whether they be regional or global. And we can cite many examples, and Chinese President Xi Jinping will be in the United States in just a few weeks to talk to President Obama about managing issues like global warming and the deal that we have struck with Iran and preventing North Korea from further proliferating nuclear weapons. So there's many things that the U.S. and China can do together. I don't think that the United States seeks hegemony. The United States seeks a peaceful order that is based on rules and that is predictable, that is really, I think, drawn up by a number of countries who share these rules and these norms, and China is welcome to contribute to them as well. So I don't see this as a very black and white question, but there are concerns about how China is managing differences with its neighbors. And frankly, China and the United States view Japan very, very differently. Yes, you have very clearly described what Japan did during the war. And there is no reason why we should forget that history. But at the same time, we should remember the peaceful role that Japan has played since the end of the war, the contributions that Japan has made. We should look forward. And I think we should talk more about reconciliation and healing and try to promote more confidence between nations. I don't think that China is right in portraying Japan as a country that is militarizing and poses a threat to the world. And public opinion polls do not support that view of Japan anywhere else in Asia, with the sole exception of South Korea.
Militarization in Japan, interesting point. Yoshiki, the Japanese Defense Ministry this year is asking for the biggest ever budget, $42 billion, to buy advanced destroyers and fighters. As much as perhaps the country would like to remain true to its pacifist principles, is it going to end up in a situation where it will have to break out of those principles?
Well, we also have to pay attention to the past experience of the Japanese defense capability. That is, for a long time, Japanese defense force could not improve, could not strengthen their power. And that was one important point of the discussion. And many people argued that we should try to improve the capability, even if a little bit, but we couldn't. But recently, it just began a few years ago, only a few years ago, and we are trying to rebalance the capacity, military capacity, so that we can, in case, so that we can respond to the actual fears.
When you say respond to, this sounds like getting ready for a potential conflict.
Well, this is all not real, but in case it happens, I think our defense capability is based on a certain projection, which which should not take place. But in case it does happen, then we have to respond to any situation. I think this is a scenario, even if it is a very yes.
Let's hope it's a scenario that doesn't actually happen and remains unrealistic. Xiao Yang, though, what does China ultimately want? Is it in China's interest to completely overturn the current world order, or simply to seek a bigger say in the current world order?
Okay, yeah, I think China has already clearly stated its intention. It's to construct a world order which is consistent with the current one, but with some adjustment. I don't think the U.S. is totally open for such a role. Actually, from the U.S. attitude,
why not, Xiao Yang? Forgive me to interrupt, but as we heard from Bonnie, she said the U.S. has extended the opportunity to engage with China, but China is behaving in a way which is very unilateral when it comes to some of the island disputes, turning reefs into airstrips, military bases, unilaterally exercising its control over some of the islands there.
No, I don't think China actually also talked to the different Southeast China Sea countries, and also I mean the U.S. The U.S. actually showed some attitude of keeping the current world order, and so China's rise is only welcomed when it stays in the current world order. For example, the establishment of AIIB or the increasing vote in IMF. This was the U.S. actually showed some attitudes of not welcoming such change. But these are actually substantial changes which China wants, because this really voice to speak in the current global system.
We've got a couple of minutes left. Forgive me, Xiao Yang, but I want to give Bonnie an opportunity. How do you respond to some of those suggestions there that basically the US and other Western powers are basically still grappling with the idea of how far do you go in welcoming the rise of China, or do you still try to count on containing China, count on the ideas of China crumbling internally?
Well, I have to take issue with your premise. The United States would certainly not benefit from China crumbling. The United States doesn't have a policy of containing China. That's simply not in accordance with the facts. The United States has welcomed China's rise in many ways. The U.S. worked very hard to get China into the World Trade Organization, and that's just one example. There is no country that has benefited more from the current international system in the last 20 years than China has. Yes, the United States has some concerns about how China wants to modify prevailing mechanisms in the international system. President Xi Jinping gave a speech in 2014 in which he said China basically wants to create a new regional architecture that would be by Asians and for Asians, would not include the United States. Even if we set aside what the United States thinks about that, I can tell you that the vast majority of countries in the Asia-Pacific region really disagree with that. Now, the point that Xiao Yang made about the IMF, we have to distinguish between the executive branch in the United States and the U.S. Congress. The executive branch, President Obama has said that we should expand the voting shares for China. They should be rebalanced. And the U.S. Congress has not passed it.
So clearly there's a difference
I
between
don't think that the United States
and the executive branch.
Certainly is.
That's the point you're making. Unfortunately, we are out of time, though. We'll have to leave it there for now and thank our guests, Xiaoyang Tang, Yoshiki Mine, and Bonnie Glaser. And thank you for watching. You can contact us by going to our programme page on our website, aljazeera.com, or post a comment on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also send us a tweet if you like at AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zaidan, and the whole team for now, it's goodbye.